Alright, welcome back folks to WrestleRant. I am Graham Houston Matthews here on my 20th birthday, and today we're reviewing the 2014 WWE Payback pay-per-view as seen on the WWE Network. Now, like I said in my 2013 review, these Payback shows, 2013, 2014, 2015, were all great. I thoroughly enjoyed this event as much as I did the 2013 show, and the entire card pretty much delivered. I thought it was a great show from start to finish. So available on the pre-show, which you can watch in the network, was Hornswoggle versus El Torito in a loser gets their head shaved match. And it's nothing you need to go out of your way to see. I thought the pre-show match they had at Extreme Rules was a lot better. That was pleasantly surprising and one of the best kickoff matches I think I've ever seen, to be quite honest with you. This was okay. It was not as fun as the first match, but if you're a El Torito fan or Hornswoggle fan, it was not a loser gets their head shaved. It was mask versus hair. If Hornswoggle lost, he would have to get his head shaved. If El Torito lost, he would have to be unmasked. And knew that wasn't going to happen, so obviously El Torito winning this matchup. Hornswoggle gets his head shaved. Was what it was, nothing terrible, but not as good as their previous matchup from Extreme Rules. Something I thought I would never say. So kicking off the actual show, though, for the United States Championship, Sheamus defending against Cesaro in a pretty basic program, and I think the advantage of kind of reviewing these more recent shows and I'm more familiar with the build and the aftermath and the matches themselves, whatever. But yeah, I think the build for this matchup was pretty basic. I think Cesaro beat Sheamus on an episode of Raw, and Sheamus extended his hand to Cesaro out of respect. Cesaro declined it, and this was around the time that Cesaro was still a Paul Heyman guy and still had some momentum. He wasn't on the downswing at all until, no pun intended, until a couple months later, until that random-ass loss to Kofi Kingston at the Raw that I was at on June 30th, a couple weeks later. But before that, though, having a great match against Sheamus on the show, which should come as no surprise. Sheamus and Cesaro have always worked really, really well together. They had another great match over the U.S. title, I think in Night of Champions, a couple months later. And this was another excellent outing from between the two. It's a lot of cool back-and-forth action. The crowd was thoroughly behind Cesaro throughout. Of course, this was taking place in Chicago. And by the way, Paul Heyman, when he came out to introduce Cesaro, there were a lot of CM Punk chants, of course, and this was before, it was Punk's podcast came out and whatever. But Paul Heyman got on the mic and he said, "Oh, he's not here right now. He's at the United Center down the street watching the Blackhawks lose their streak," or something like that, to a chorus of boos. It was great, vintage Paul Heyman. And then he kind of tied that into Brock Lesnar ending the most famous streak in WWE history at WrestleMania at the hands of, the Undertaker's, at the hands of Brock Lesnar. And then he tied that back into Cesaro, so an awesome introduction for Cesaro. But like I said, the match itself, great stuff, an amazing way of kicking off the show. Sheamus, I think Cesaro, he was doing the swing, and people were going along with it. They were counting, and Cesaro just got dizzy when he was done. And Sheamus rolling up Cesaro into an inside package and picking up the victory. So Cesaro was protected in defeat. It wasn't like he was beat 1, 2, 3. Technically he was, but it was via a roll-up, so he was kind of protected. Sheamus still the United States champion. I thought it was building to Cesaro winning the belt maybe later down the line, or maybe a couple weeks later. That would of course not come to be. The feud was just kind of cut short here. But for what it was, though, I thought it was an excellent match and a very, very good way of kicking off the show. So up next in tag team action, Ryback taking on Cody Rhodes and Goldust. This match was not advertised before the event, and it was set up on the pre-show when Cody Rhodes and Goldust were just not really on the same page. And for the last month and a half before this, they were really just kind of building or teasing tension between the two, that Cody Rhodes couldn't get the job done. They were teasing a heel turn with him. And how many times have we seen this, with these two guys? We saw it earlier this year in 2015. We saw it at this point. We saw it back in 2011, 2012. I mean, they just keep on teasing and they never actually deliver. We finally got a match between the two, God forbid, earlier this year at Fastlane, but they dropped the program right afterwards, unfortunately. But this was kind of setting that up. The match itself was actually pretty good. I was surprised. I mean, these two teams have always worked well together. I like Ryback. I love Ryback. I like Curtis Axel. I'm not a huge fan of his, but I do like Curtis Axel. I was just never a fan of Ryback, so I thought they just never really had any chemistry. Granted, down the line in the latter half of their tenure, they kind of showed some signs of chemistry, showed some signs of being a cohesive unit and working together and stuff like that. It's not like they were never on the same page. It's just Ryback and Axel as a team on paper just does not mesh at all. Axel and Mandel, I could see that, but Ryback and Axel, even with the dumb Rybaxel nickname, it just didn't click. So I wasn't never really a fan of theirs. But they did have a really good match here. Like I said, for a match that was not advertised, that was not originally supposed to happen going into the show, I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. And Ryback picking up the victory. I think Cody Rhodes was going for a disaster kick, and then Ryback caught him in a shell-shocked. So that was a really cool finish. Picking up the win, Cody Rhodes takes the mic after the matchup and says to Goldust, brother to brother, I think you need to find yourself a new tag team partner, and just walks off. So like I said earlier, I thought it was kind of planting the seeds for a future heel turn between them, or, I don't know, a split, obviously. But it was only about 2 or 3 weeks later, I think, that Stardust debuted, and that was the new gimmick, and Cody Rhodes has been Stardust ever since, unfortunately. I'm not a Stardust fan. I think he's much better off as Cody Rhodes, especially now that he's losing to R-Truth and all these other losers and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought this was a really good match, though, and it kind of furthered the story successfully between Rhodes and Goldust. And the people were into it, too. I mean, it's not just because it was Chicago. They told a good story. There was a story there, and the in-ring action was pretty entertaining as well. So 2 thumbs up for that matchup. Up next, Rusev versus Big E. In about a 3 or 4 minute matchup. I mean, this was around the time that Rusev was just kind of stacking up victories. His first real feud was with Big E, and this was their first, I think Rusev's, or other than the Extreme Rules match, his first major pay-per-view outing. I mean, it was actually really fun. Again, for a matchup that I did not have high expectations for, I figured it would just kind of be a standard squash. It was a pretty fun match. They worked really well together. I thought it was better than their rematch at Money in the Bank, but it was still a really good matchup. In addition to the fact, I think there was one spot where Rusev was on the apron, and then Big E just launches himself through the ropes and spears him. They both go tumbling to the outside. He does it now, Big E, that is. He still does that move today. Not as frequently, thankfully, because otherwise it would get old, but, when saved for the special occasions, it packs a punch. No pun intended, but I thought that was a great spot. The people came alive for that. The people in the front row stood up and were marking out. That was a cool moment. Maybe not marking out, but they were pretty excited, though. So that was a cool moment. Rusev picking up the victory with the accolade, and just another nice win for Rusev on his way to the top. And Big E, being a former Intercontinental Champion, it was a credible win for the Bulgarian Brute. So a good match there. Up next, Kofi Kingston versus Bo Dallas, again in another matchup that was not advertised before the event. So Kofi comes out, and then Bo Dallas does his usual stick. And it's funny, too, for a guy that had debuted on the main roster only maybe 2 or 3 weeks before this, on an episode of SmackDown, that is. The guy maybe had only 1 Raw appearance under his belt before he made his pay-per-view debut. And Jerry Lawler was saying that, like, how does this guy deserve to be here? He's only had 2 wins. He shouldn't be competing on a pay-per-view just yet. Blah, 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 blah. So he comes out, Bo Dallas doing his great shtick. And like I said, for a guy that had only had 2 televised WWE appearances on TV, he was really over. The crowd loved it. I mean, again, this is Chicago. They probably saw his work on NXT. And as a heel, Bo Dallas was great too. Back in NXT, I think that was his best work. And this was around the time, again, where they were doing something with Bo Dallas. I mean, granted, a year later, they're doing the, as I record this, Payback or Elimination Chamber is tonight. So they're kind of doing that little feud right now with Neville. But other than that, though, they haven't done much with him since this, since his kind of little mini win streak back in the summer of 2014. But yeah, Bo Dallas comes out, cuts a promo, and before the match, the bell just rang, I guess. But before the match could technically begin, Kane comes out, delivers a tombstone to Kofi Kingston, and then after Kane walks away, Bo Dallas gets back on the mic and says, "Kofi, all you have to do is Bo leave," and the crowd does along with him. It was pretty great. So a nice little appearance by Bo Dallas. And the thing with Kofi getting attacked by Kane, it seemed random at the time. I'm sure it was kind of random for those in attendance. And they explained it on commentary, but again, the people in attendance can't hear the commentary, so they were probably just kind of confused. But yeah, the commentators explained afterwards that Kofi Kingston had put out a tweet on his Twitter trashing the Authority or questioning their motives in regards to Daniel Bryan. Whatever it was, they were not happy with Kofi Kingston, so they sent Kane out there to do their bidding. So that was pretty much that. So that was kind of random. But it was cool to see Bo Dallas. So that was the saving grace of this little segment. Up next, for the Intercontinental Championship, Bad News Barrett defending against Rob Van Dam. And again, a very good matchup. I was really surprised. I was very impressed with a lot of the matches on the undercard of this show because they all deliver. They all exceeded expectations. RVD, I've always been a fan of his. He's a very good in-ring athlete even today, even though he's kind of winding down his career. He worked really well with Bad News Barry. I thought they delivered a really, really good matchup, and I liked down the stretch the constant reversals and the constant counters when it came to their finishing maneuvers. RVD would go for the 5-star, and Barrett would roll out of the way. Barrett would go for the bullhammer, and RVD would duck it. So it kind of made it feel more than just a televised matchup, just more than a standard outing. It did kind of have that special feel to it, so that's what I kind of enjoyed about it. So I thought that was good. And Barrett, in the end, picking up the victory with a mean Bad News bullhammer to retain his Intercontinental Championship. And the crowd was very much into. I mean, RVD was well over, but Bad News Barrett had his fair share of fans in the crowd, as well. So that was kind of goes to show how over this guy was and the role that this guy was on during his reign as Intercontinental Champion in mid-2014. And granted, his push did not end because of WWE's poor booking. That was the case when he came back earlier this year, but it was just kind of a bad case of him getting injured, at the wrong place at the wrong time, and right before the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, in which he was unable to compete in that matchup. But yeah, I thought this was a really, really good matchup, though. It kind of made that IC title feel more prestigious as a result, and I mean, I definitely felt at that time that the mid-card belts were definitely getting a boost from being defended all the time and all this other stuff, so I thought that was a great match, and I really, really enjoyed it. Up next, or right before the next matchup, we had a segment involving Daniel Bryan, Brie Bella, and Stephanie McMahon, where going into the show, Daniel Bryan had a ultimatum, whether he strip him or whether he vacate the WWE World Heavyweight Championship and Stephanie strip him of the gold, or Brie Bella quit her job after laying her hands on Stephanie McMahon a couple days earlier on Raw. So it was either lose the championship or have his fiance be fired. And then they had a pretty good back and forth. Stephanie dropping, a little shot at CM Punk, saying, you can have your wife quit just like CM Punk did, to a chorus of boos. I mean, all these months later, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, granted, Punk walked out. He did not quit, though. He got fired, I think maybe a week or so after this. I mean, if the timeline matches up. But that aside, though, I really enjoyed this segment. I thought Daniel Bryan, who was not known for being an amazing mic worker, I mean, you go back from his time 5 years ago when the guy was on NXT. I mean, he was a good worker down on the indie scene, but it was not his strong suit, of course. And he really has come a long way. He's a really good mic worker all these years later. And Brie Bella, who I was never really fond of on the mic, she's not a great actor now. I mean, she was not an amazing actor before this angle either. But in this segment, I thought she was pretty good. I enjoyed her stuff here. And before Stephanie could just strip Daniel Bryan of the championship, Brie Bella says that won't be necessary because I quit. And the people go crazy, and then Stephanie just kind of stands there laughing, and Brie Bella slaps her across the face, and I'm sure you've seen it. They replayed it a million times on this show in the months that followed, so I'm sure you've seen it a million times over. But yeah, that was great, and the crowd just erupted when that happened to finally see Stephanie get her comeuppance. And, when stuff like that happens, it's a big moment, because if you really think about it, in the 2 years, I'm not talking about in the last 15 that she's been with WWE, but for the last 2 or 3 years that Stephanie's been back in the WWE fold as a heel, you can count on one hand how many times she's been given her comeuppance, Not many guys are going to beat her up. They're not going to do guy-on-girl violence. The only other time I can think of that comes to mind where she was attacked or she was injured or whatever, other than the SummerSlam match, which even there she won. But at WrestleMania, when Daniel Bryan did like a flying toupee through the rope or something like that, or whatever it was, and Stephanie McMahon was in the middle of the fray, and she fell down along with Triple H and whoever else was on ringside. So that was about it. So the crowd erupted huge for that moment when she got slapped by Brie Bella, furthering that feud, and of course they would later meet at SummerSlam, kind of planting the siege for that. So a really good segment. Daniel Bryan's still the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, of course, not for long. It was kind of pointless that Brie Bella quit, because Daniel Bryan would eventually have to be stripped of the title anyway, due to his injury being a lot worse than they expected it was, unfortunately. But a good segment nevertheless. Up next, a last man standing match between John Cena and Bray Wyatt. Now, my thoughts on this feud, I talked about it on my Extreme Rules review, but my thoughts on this feud are very well documented. I was not a fan. Early on the road to WrestleMania, it really went kind of back and forth. Initially, I didn't really want to see Wyatt versus Cena at WrestleMania because it didn't make any sense. I thought it was too much too soon for Bray Wyatt, who I love. I think he's a great character, but feeding someone to John Cena right off the bat is not usually the best course of action if history has been any indication. But, then I was kind of warming up to it in the weeks leading up to WrestleMania because, the whole legacy stuff Well, the narrative of what they were, the narrative they were trying to tell with John Cena trying to solidify his legacy was dumb. I mean, the guy's a 15-time world champion or 14-time world champion at the time this feud was taking place. So that was kind of comical. But before that, I mean, other than that, though, I thought that was a really good feud. The match at WrestleMania did not really sell me. The feud in between WrestleMania and Extreme Rules was good. The Extreme Rules match was terrible. I was not a fan of that at all. Easily one of the worst and most disappointing matches of 2014, in my opinion anyway. And then everything after that was just kind of been there, done that. I just really want to get this feud over with. So comes the Payback match. I mean, I thought this match was amazing. Come this matchup, I thought both Bray Wyatt and John Cena brought their A game. And maybe I thought it was so great because their previous two matches weren't really that good. The WrestleMania match wasn't terrible. I just thought it was kind of boring for the most part. I did not like the end result. And then the Extreme Rules match, like I said, I was not a fan of at all. So this matchup really stood out as being the best of the bunch, of course. And I would say one of the best matches of the year. Not like top 10 or anything, but I think I put it in my top 20, maybe top 25 best matches in WWE in 2014. And rightfully so. I thought both guys brought their A game, like I said before, and they were really on their, they really put forth a strong effort here. And that John Cena at one point, which we had not seen too much of at that point. I mean, we had seen it a couple weeks afterwards, and we see it now from time to time. But John Cena picking up a steel steps and throwing him at Bray Wyatt at ringside was an awesome spot. Again, something that we don't see too much of from John Cena. So just a crazy show of strength from the 14-time WWE champion. And Bray Wyatt, of course, enlisting the help of his Wyatt family members, Luke Harper and Eric Rowan. They would come down and help him try to defeat John Cena. The Usos would come down as well to help out John Cena. And they were coming out to help Bray Wyatt, excuse me, and the Usos came out to help John Cena. So they were going at it at ringside. One of the Usos brothers doing the bottom, whatever it is, the butt splash or whatever it is that they do in memory of Umaga. They did that through the table at ringside against the barricade. That was a great spot. Luke Harper suplexing one of them through a table at ringside. Just mayhem everywhere. These guys were using steel chairs, steel steps, and tables, and Singapore canes, and everything else. John Cena kind of jumping to ringside and Bray Wyatt catching him into his sister Abigail. Cena doing an AA to Bray Wyatt on the outside. I thought it was a great match. I think I enjoyed it the second time around more than I did the first. And I thought it was a good match the first time. I thought watching it back, I'm thinking, why didn't I give this match higher praise? I thought it was awesome. Everyone involved really put forth a strong effort. I thought it was an amazing contest, especially given the fact that it was a last man standing match, which can usually be make or break, hit or miss. It can either be really boring or really boring or really exciting. I thought this was definitely the latter. These guys were great in this matchup. I loved it. And of course, the finish I was not too fond of. John Cena doing an AA to Bray Wyatt through some part of the equipment and then putting another piece of equipment on top of that. So he was quote-unquote buried. So I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that. And then John Cena emerging victorious via standing on top of Bray Wyatt. So I thought, the ceremonial burial of Bray Wyatt was not too kind to him, I guess. I mean, I guess there were other ways to make him look strong. I mean, it's not like he was pinned or anything like that. But I guess there were kind of other ways. I mean, I would have been happy had he won. I mean, I guess they were kind of building John Cena up to be the next world champion, so I get that. Just I was not really fond of the finish of him getting quote-unquote buried, especially considering the fact that we had seen something similar with the Big Show and Del Rio the year before, and we just saw it recently with Big Show and Roman Reigns at Extreme Rules, where he was putting the table on top of him or whatever the hell happened. But other than the finish, though, and John Cena winning, of course, this was an awesome matchup and probably, along with the main event, one of the best matches of the entire night. So up next, we have the Divas Championship match between Paige and Alicia Fox. A decent match. I mean, there's not really much more I could say about that. I mean, they had Fox beat Paige on an episode of Raw in England, and that was about it. That was pretty much the only build this match got, so I really didn't care about it. Other than Alicia Fox doing the whole, temper tantrum thing after winning and then losing, so people were just kind of more looking forward to that than anything else. And after the matchup, after she lost, she didn't do anything anyway. She just kind of stood there. I mean, again, her temper tantrums were really hit or miss. They were either great, like over the top, or they were just... She was a terrible actor. I like Alicia Fox, but some of the temper tantrums were just kind of got annoying. Not like good heat annoying, just kind of like, why are you doing that? It's not, you're not selling it well annoying, you know what I mean? So, that was pretty much that. So she never really got that angry after the matchup ended anyway, so that was kind of a waste. The match itself was okay, but Paige's biggest issue with her Divas title reign, although I enjoyed it, she just didn't have any character development, so people just really couldn't care about her, you know? I mean, I think people... I mean, this crowd was hot for her, you know, no pun intended, I guess, considering it was Chicago. But, you know, anywhere else she went, she didn't really get much of a reaction because we didn't really know much about her. Yeah, sure, she beat AJ, the longest reigning Divas champion in history, the night after WrestleMania, in an amazing moment. But other than that, what do we know about her? You know, it wasn't really until she turned heel a while later, a couple weeks later, I think, the night after Money in the Bank, that we got to know more about Paige. And when she turned heel and whatever, that was kind of the best work I think she's ever done in her WWE tenure, along with right now. So, yeah, decent match, nothing to complain about, but it was just kind of, especially right before the main event, people were not going to be hot for this matchup, and that kind of goes without saying. So we get to the main event, a no-holds-barred elimination match between The Shield and Evolution. So this was the feud, unlike John Cena and Bray Wyatt, that I freaking loved. From the moment that it started the night after WrestleMania to the moment it ended on this pay-per-view. I thought these two teams were freaking awesome. I love the Extreme Rules matchup. I thought that one was slightly better. This one told a better story because Evolution spent most of the matchup just kind of beating the shit out of the Shield. I mean, Randy Orton, it's hard to describe because the pay-per-view stages are all kind of just generic these days. But I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. They have those like little walls near where the ramp is, or near the stage where the superstars enter. And then Orton grabbing, I think Seth Rollins, or maybe it was Dean Ambrose. It was definitely Dean Ambrose, doing his top rope DDT on top of that little mini wall thing and just slamming his skull right into the cement. That was pretty brutal. Just kind of doing also the Shield powerbomb, mocking that on Roman Reigns and taking him out on the commentating table at ringside. Just a brutal, brutal bout. The first one, again, like I said before, I thought was more exciting. But this one I thought told a better story with the Shield having to overcome the odds, overcome the destruction of Evolution, and kind of band together to take them out one by one, considering, again, this was an elimination matchup, and they fully utilized the no-holds-barred stipulation. There were points when it was a normal, standard six-person tag team matchup, where they would have to tag in and out, but of course, as one would expect, it broke down into an all-out chaos down the stretch, and to all the spots like I mentioned before, so they were really just kind of going balls to the wall in this matchup. I really, really enjoyed it. So then we get down to the final stretch, I guess. This matchup went for a half an hour, and it's not like they kind of spaced out the eliminations. All the eliminations happened in the final 3 or 4 minutes. But yeah, Evolution spent the final 10 minutes or so just beating the crap out of the Shield, teaching them a lesson. JBL was saying on commentary that they didn't want to put them away because they wanted to teach them a lesson. They wanted to solidify their dominance as the greatest faction of all time and just kind of teach them, beat that respect into them. So that would end up costing them the victory in the end. Seth Rollins jumping off the Titantron on top of Evolution. That was an awesome spot. And then we would get them back in the ring. Batista getting attacked by Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, I think it was. Getting speared by Roman Reigns for the 1-2-3. He would come back and spear Roman Reigns anyway, as he was about to put away. Or I think who is it? I think it was either Seth Rollins or Reigns. I think it was Reigns. I don't know. He speared somebody despite being eliminated. And they could have stayed out there too. I mean, it was no disqualification anyway, so they easily just could have come back out and just beat the crap out of the Shield. It didn't really matter. But yeah, Batista got eliminated via, not Roman Reigns, via Seth Rollins. I think it was Roman Reigns who speared him, then Seth Rollins picked up the 1-2-3 for him. And then Dean Ambrose doing the Dirty Deeds DDT on Randy Orton on top of a chair to put him away. And then it came down to Triple H and then the rest of the Shield. And this was just blowing my mind that they did the clean sweep. I would have sworn that it was going to come down to Roman Reigns and either Triple H or the entire Evolution versus Roman Reigns. He would have beaten them all or something dumb like that. But, it came down to quite the opposite. It came down to Triple H and the rest of the Shield. And he was going to deliver a pedigree to Dean Ambrose. Seth Rollins, I think he had a sledgehammer in his hand or something. And then Seth Rollins doing his jumping knee off the top rope. And then Roman Reigns following it up with a spear to pin him for the 1-2-3 and for the clean sweep, the victory, and the greatest victory in the Shield's career in the main event of a WWE pay-per-view. So getting that one pay-per-view main event before they split up the next night against three of the greatest of all time, and Triple H, Randy Orton, and Batista. So I thought the match was spectacular. I thought they told a stellar story. It gave the Shield a huge rub, as if they weren't already over before. Definitely solidified them in my mind as the greatest faction, maybe not of all time in WWE history. I'm not accounting for like the Four Horsemen and stuff like that. But probably maybe in WWE history, I know DX is probably the most decorated, but no other faction has had as great of a match streak as the Shield did, being as consistently beastly booked, for lack of a better term, as the Shield was for their year-and-a-half run, for their 18-month plus run. And like I said, the next night on Raw, it's funny too because I tweeted after the match ended that it's going to be a sad day when these guys break up. And then the very next night they broke up when Seth Rollins, on my birthday too, from a year ago from today, and the Shield splitting up. And it's amazing to think it's been a year too, considering all that's happened. And Ambrose and Rollins in the main event of Elimination Chamber this past week, and Roman Reigns is doing well, and it's crazy to think how far these guys have come in the last year. And I love the Evolution reunion, by the way, and I tweeted that not too long ago that I think that was one of the more underrated things about 2014. I thought 2014 was a good year for WWE, or just kind of a very up and down year. But I thought the Evolution reunion was definitely one of the more underrated parts of it. I thought all three guys were great, especially Batista, a guy that got shit on so much. The Blue Tista stuff on the show is pretty funny. Calling people dipshits after the show, just basically in character, though. The work that he put in, the people that he put over, the character development that he showed, the promos that he cut, I thought were all awesome. All the matches that he had, the one at WrestleMania, Extreme Rules, this matchup, were all very, very good. And he came a long way from being, the guy out of breath in the Royal Rumble to being, on the top of his game in this matchup before he quit the next night. We haven't seen him since, unfortunately. I'm still waiting for Batista to come back. But, I thought this was an amazing matchup and a great way to go off the show. So that is Payback 2014. And as I said before, I thought all these Payback shows, 2013, 2014, 2015, were all great. This one was no exception for the second annual Payback event. I mean, it's not like there was a strong streak of great Payback shows. This was only the second one. But it did keep the strong streak going because I thought it was a very enjoyable event. So matches to watch from this show, absolutely the main event if you have the time to spare. It's about 30 minutes. Last man standing match between Cena and Wyatt is about 24, but also a great match that is well worth going out of your way to see. The other matches, the undercard I thought was very, very good. Sheamus and Cesaro was, great as expected. Barrett and RVD was a very good match. The Bo Dallas stuff was fun. Rusev got a good win. The Ryback Cody Rhodes Goldust stuff was better than expected. And then the segment involving Daniel Bryan, Stephanie, and Brie was also interesting and kind of set the stage for SummerSlam, as most of these matchups pretty much did. So, I thought it was a great show. Gets 2 thumbs up from me. And also the great Chicago crowd. How could I forget, making for an electric atmosphere throughout the entire evening. I thought they definitely enhanced my enjoyment of the event. So make sure to go back and watch Payback 2014 on the WWE Network. On Saturday, I will not be reviewing Payback 2015, like I said in my last video. I usually have that year-long window to review pay-per-views. Otherwise, what's the point? I like to have that, do it from a retrospective point of view. And like I said, I wouldn't know what happened a year later or whatever, because we were only a few weeks removed from Payback 2015. But if you want my thoughts on that show, on Payback 2014, Payback 2013, I have all the written reviews on nextEraWrestling.net, so each of those reviews are up on the website. Just go to the search bar, go to nextEraWrestling.net, go to the search bar, type in Payback 2013, or 2014, or 2015, whatever. You'll get my full written review of each of those pay-per-views. But instead, on Saturday, we kick off my Money in the Bank reviews. Money in the Bank 2010 on Saturday, 2011, one of my favorite pay-per-views. My favorite pay-per-view of all time, hands down, on Sunday. And then from there, we have Money in the Bank 2013, 2014, or 2012, 2013, and 2014. And then we move into my SummerSlam reviews by mid-June, in time for the summer for the next 2 months. And by that point, as I said a couple weeks ago, I think it was, I'll be kind of holding back the pay-per-view schedule, or the WrestleRant schedule. I'll be tying it back. I don't know what the exact term is. It's slipping my mind at the moment. But it's going to be cut short. It's going to be cut back. That's the word I'm looking for. That's a term I'm trying to say. It's going to be cut back just a little bit. WrestleRant videos will be up only on Tuesdays and Saturdays, not on Sundays. I think 3 days a week will be. It's a little nuts. I mean, to watch all those pay-per-views in a short period of time can be a little overwhelming at times, and I don't have enough time at some points during the month to watch all these pay-per-views. Although I do find the time, it can be a little much with everything else that's going on. But still, it is that's it. SummerSlam reviews this summer, and anything after that will probably be back. I mean, I'll definitely fluctuate between 2 WrestleRant videos a week and then 3. It really all kind of depends on the time of the year and how many pay-per-view reviews I need to squeeze. And there's not as many SummerSlam reviews as there was WrestleMania reviews, because I reviewed a lot of SummerSlams last year, and there's not like 30 of them as there was WrestleMania, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, Money in the Bank 2010 on Saturday, so stay tuned for that review this upcoming week. But in the meantime, and in between time, you guys can catch me on Twitter at WrestleRant, on Facebook at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. Have a great week, folks, and I'll catch you guys down the road.